G'day. Welcome to the Essential Oil Science Series video number 12. This is the second part of the antifungal oils videos. I'm sitting in front of a beautiful example of a fungus there. Look, these are all the fruiting bodies sticking out the side there, sending spores off into the air. The fungus itself, most of it's inside these logs here, kind of making its way up through the log, putting enzymes out into the log to break it down and absorbing the nutrients from the log. So I'm going to go over a little bit of fun chemistry and go over last week's experiments. I did a bunch of experiments this past week, and then suggest an experiment for this week for you guys. Right, my son was trying to make his Lego smell good, so he added some ylang-ylang to his little cup of water he was using to clean his Lego in, and this is what happened.
Everything goes.
So this is after sitting in water and ylang-ylang oil for a couple of hours. So there you have it. You put ylang-ylang oil on Lego and it breaks it down. Why is that? Well, let's take a brief look at some of the components of the plastic that's in Lego. It's a nice kind of plastic that's used in Lego. It's supposed to be non-toxic and all of that stuff, better for the environment. It contains this thing here, styrene, which maybe, sounds familiar to all of us, I'm sure, when we think of polystyrene, and a couple of other components that are all kind of linked together in a chain to make it into the kind of plastic that it is. And it looks a whole lot like an essential oil, right? Like the essential oils we've been looking at. And well, let's look at menthol here, for example. Oil looks very similar. And basically, these two things can interact with each other very nicely. So essential oils have the ability to act as solvents for things like this, because they can be absorbed into this stuff. So that's exactly what happens. You put stuff like this in liquid form around a plastic that contains little units like this, and it starts to pull those units away from the plastic and breaks it down. What about plastic bottles? Well, plastic bottles contain plasticizers, which prevents the plastic from being too brittle and breakable. Here's an example of a plasticizer. This is a common one, DEHP, used mostly with PVC, but it's again, similar kind of thing to this, although a whole lot bigger. And again, this stuff can act as solvents, and it can pull these plasticizers out of the plastic, and if you drink that, it's not good for you. There's been a lot of studies showing that this stuff ain't good for you. Most plasticizers aren't good for you. Alright, so let's go over last week's experiments. Okay, so here they are in table form. Like I said, I love tables. Who doesn't? And these are some of the oils that I've used this week. On Guard, Melaleuca, Oregano, Cinnamon, Lemon Oil, On Guard Hand Sanitizer, Vegemite. What's that all about? We'll come to that in a second. Okay, so I mentioned that when I came home there were all these mold spores in the air, and I was having an allergic reaction to them. I used On Guard in a diffuser, cleaned it up. It worked beautifully against those spores. Our chopping board had mold on it, and I used On Guard against it, cleaned it up nicely. Used Melaleuca against it, also cleaned it up nicely. Cat food. Here's a photo of the inside of the big cat food bin that we have. Beautiful example of some mold growing in here. And I decided to add some On Guard, close the lid, and see what would happen. So close the lid, open it up the next day. It was a nice warm day, so the mold should have still been active. And these are the drops of On Guard that I put down there. And the interesting thing was, when I took a close look at these drops, the mold itself seemed to be growing on those little drops. So this was highly surprising to me. I thought On Guard is going to kill any kind of mold. But remember, I spoke last week about the fact that different types of fungus and there's millions of different types, rely on different chemical processes in order to live and reproduce and do all of that stuff. So one oil might have a component that can interrupt one set of chemical processes for one specific type of fungus, but be ineffective against a different type because it relies on a different set of processes. So in the case of the mold that was in the cat food, On Guard was ineffective, and in fact may have even provided some nutrition and some nourishment for that mold. Also put some Melaleuca in there. Melaleuca didn't do anything. Bread yeast, I'm going to show you a video of the setup for this experiment, and this is one that would be fun for you to try at home with your kids. So these are my daughter's hands. It's not a yarrow oil miracle. It's made my hands look beautiful again. So she's putting some sugar in some jars here, adding some yeast. This is just standard bread yeast. Trying to get the same quantities in each, although as close as possible. These raisins are just added for fun. They just they do add a little bit of sugar, which is what the yeast loves to eat, but you'll see, they're just a little bit of fun. We've added some warm water, and they're going to get stirred up. And that jar on the left there, she's going to add some On Guard. There's the On Guard bottle, and she added about 4 drops. Okay, so about half an hour later, this is what we saw. There was a whole lot of activity going on in this guy here, the one that didn't have the On Guard, and a whole lot less activity going here. And I was like, yes, this is very exciting. On Guard kills the yeast. But this is what happened the next day. Take a look at this guy here. This is the one with the On Guard, and you can see that raisin going up there. This is part of the fun of this experiment. You get to see raisins moving around. The one here without the On Guard is quite a bit less active, and in fact I put my ear over each of them, and the one with the On Guard was a whole lot more active. So remember, this is the next day. When it was all kind of said and done, by the end of the second day, this guy here, the one without the On Guard, was basically done for. It was finished, and this liquid was clearing up because there wasn't any more bubbling or anything going on. Oh, take note of this junk in the bottom here. I believe that's what Vegemite's made of. Anyway, let's go back up to here. So the On Guard doesn't seem to have killed the bread yeast, so it didn't kill it, but seems to have slowed down its activity. So like I said, you can try this experiment yourselves at home. Try a whole bunch of different oils, see what happens. The kids can have a whole lot of fun with this one. Alright, so that junk on the bottom I think is what Vegemite is made of. When we got home to our jars of Vegemite that had been sitting in the cupboard for 6 months, there was absolutely no sign of mold or anything whatsoever. It might be the excessive amounts of salt in the Vegemite, but I like to think that this yeast extract, as it's called, the stuff that's left over after you've used up yeast, doesn't provide food for other yeasts. Don't know. All right, so the paint mold. Here's the kind of crux of last week's experiments, and I'm going to show you another video describing the setup for this guy. All right, so remember all the mold on the roof or the ceiling of my porch? I'm trying to attack it here. This is just some water. I've sprayed some water on there, and now I'm trying to brush the black stuff off. In the next spot there, I've put some lemon oil. I sprayed it half an hour earlier, and now I'm trying to wash it off to see what's left. Next is cinnamon oil, and next to that we have some oregano, and then in the second last patch I have some Melaleuca, and finally, oh, there's the Melaleuca there. So again, all of this I sprayed half an hour before, and now I'm just trying to wash off whatever got loosened by the oil. In this last patch, this is On Guard hand sanitizer, and clearly this has come out are the cleanest. So we look at all of them, none of them are any better than just the straight up water, except for that On Guard hand sanitizer. So the winner was this guy here, the On Guard hand sanitizer. So of course I immediately thought, oh, it must be the On Guard that's killing that mold on the wall. So I tried something obvious, and that was some straight up On Guard oil. And there's a little patch where I tried the straight up On Guard and didn't look any different to the water. If you look at the ingredients here, it's, what is it, 64% ethyl alcohol. So I went to the store and bought myself some of this stuff, which is also 64% ethyl alcohol. I thought maybe it's the ethyl alcohol, and here is the patch right here with the straight ethyl alcohol, and believe it or not, it looked exactly the same as the water as well. So what's going on there? It could be the combination of the On Guard and the ethyl alcohol. They could be working together synergistically here to kill off this mold. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. All right, so this week for your experiments, I'd like you to do something similar to what I've done down below here. Just choose some kind of mold or fungus in your house and try different things against it and see how effective they are. And I'd love to hear your results, and I'm sure you'd love to hear each other's results. Have a fantastic week. Next week I'm going to get on to antibacterial oils. I will see you then.